Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a warm welcome to you all to the Social Enterprise Summit. My name is Anki Ng. I'm the founder of an outcome-based finance advisory called Shifted, based in Hong Kong. And I'm delighted to be your moderator for today as we explore this exciting topic of the future of impact investing. Impact investing has emerged as a powerful notion over the recent decade. It is a dynamic field that combines both financial returns as well as social and environmental outcomes, paving the way for a much more sustainable, resilient, as well as equitable future for all. Our objective today is to take a deep dive into the topic of impact investing and to explore the trends and opportunities that shape the future of this sector. But our exploration will not stop short in impact investing alone. We will also explore different concepts, including ESG investing, sustainable investing, blended finance, as a holistic approach towards thinking about capital consciously towards achieving social and environmental outcome. So these approaches, from our perspective, create a much more dynamic spectrum on how we can tackle some of the most pressing and complex challenges that we face in the world today, especially in the realm of climate change as well as income inequality. For today's session, we have an exciting panel to my very left, and we have the privilege of hearing from these esteemed and thought leaders who are at the forefront of the impact investing movement. They bring a wealth of expertise as well as a very cross-sectoral outlook on how we should look at impact investing. Together, we will explore the transformative potential of impact investing and discuss how we can drive meaningful change across various sectors and regions as a whole. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our speakers. And so starting from the very left, we have Alvin Lee, Alvin is a seasoned next-gen impact investor and policy researcher. He currently is the head of A&F Capital, an Asia-based family office, and he oversees various impact investing deals across different regions. And he also wears a second hat as a PhD candidate in public policy at HKUST at the moment. Followed by Professor Louis Chang. Welcome, Louis. Louis is the Dr. S.H. Ho Professor of Banking and Finance and the Director of Research Center for ESG and Research Institute for Business at the Hang Seng University of Hong Kong. He was also a former committee member of the Hospital Authority Provident Fund scheme where he led the ESG efforts for its $8 billion investment portfolio. And last but not least, we have Ellen Yet. Ellen is the philanthropy advisor of social impact and philanthropy at UBS for Greater China. She provides bespoke philanthropic services for high net worth and ultra high net worth clients, ranging from the giving strategy all the way to impact evaluation and monitoring for specific philanthropic projects. So to kick off this session, let us now turn our attention to the individual presentations that our panelists have prepared. And please join me in welcoming Ellen as our first presenter for today. Thanks, Ellen. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anki, and good morning, everyone. I see a lot of energy flowing around today. And this is Ellen, and from UBS. And part of my work is helping, I usually joke about it, is the rest of the bank, they help the clients to make money, and part of my role is to help them to spend. So my roles on a day-to-day basis is to advise them when they have, because every client and when they reach certain life stages, they will start to have planning about around issues like succession, philanthropy, family, so on and so forth. So I'm there, to depending on their needs and advice on it. And very happy today, we are spending time on this important topic of investing for impact investing. So first thing first, based on the bank's global survey, we understand that there are actually a huge amount for impact. You see, 95% of the billionaires, according to our survey, see it as their responsibility to lead or contribute to solving the global issues, be it social issues or environment issues. How can we drive more solutions? We must radically rethink how the economy works and build an impact economy. By that we mean somehow there should be a paradigm shift. We don't know exactly when it will happen, but we know that it's happening, and suddenly they will reach certain tipping point at some time. Instead of a GDP output-based kind of economy, we are now moving towards an impact-based economy that values people and the planet in all investment decisions, not just about the economic output. Accordingly, the impact economy will help to solve some of those toughest issues on Earth or as listed in the Sustainable Development Goals. You see, 1 billion of people in the world are still having no access to very basic healthcare, and more than 600 million youth lack basic mathematical skills and literacy skills. So you see, over 6 million. So how many scholarships are there? Sidetrack of it, when I talk to clients, most of the time, I think probably you might have experience, like if I talk to 10 clients, like 9 of them would say, when they do philanthropy, they usually do support education, and 9 of them would say, I do scholarships. Well, scholarship, undoubtedly is a good thing, honestly, because it, provide the access which may otherwise not available to them. But then think about the issue with scholarships. Now, typically a scholarship, with that funding, typically it goes to either the top students or the poorer students. How about those in between? We're talking about 600 million of them. So is there any other way that we can make the same amount of capital more effectively? For example, is there any way we can recycle that? Helping more than one student. So these are the topics that, hopefully we can explore more. And through discussions like these today, we can certainly delve into more about it. And then, of course, the climate, something we cannot, turn a cold eye no longer anymore. COP28 is coming up. And then 50% increase in global CO2 emissions. So everybody are talking about net zero 2030, 40, 50. So what are we going to do about it? With an impact economy, we think, in our belief, actually UBS globally issue a white paper on this topic. Build a world that's profitable for everyone. It's not just about solving this issue, but that in the process, we are actually creating new jobs, over 300 million, and then there are new market opportunities. According to Forbes, it has been forecasted that the philanthropic capital will grow. It's been estimated that by 2030, the total estimated philanthropy capital will reach to the stage of globally 5 to 10 trillion US. But to solve the issues, a few of them I just list out in the price slides. But that's of course that's not all of them. If we think about the 17 SDG goals, we are talking about 30 trillion pounds of funding gap required to meet those SDG goals by year 2030. That translates to 4.6 trillion annual gap to meet those. So I believe that takes even 10 Bill Gates together might not be able to solve it. We need to turn to some more solutions. We must find investable pathway to solve it, and impact investing could be one of those solutions now. Yeah, I said only 1 trillion. Actually, if we look at the survey 2002 result, Forbes survey or GIN survey, it's actually a substantial growth. Fair enough to say. It's in particular in the Asia, APAC, it's a very substantial growth. from more than 40% since the COVID period. But having said, the total amount invested in impact investing stands around, in this part of the world, is 1 trillion invested for impact today. So, in the past, when we talk about philanthropy, when we talk with ultra-high net worth families or individuals, typically we start from my right-hand side of this chart. We talk about grant making, we talk about traditional philanthropy, we talk about scholarship, we talk about making grants to sponsor some pilot program, children-related, health-related, so on and so forth. But then, with time, because of the issue that I just outlined just, a few minutes back, we see that, we need to do more. So that's why, more than a decade ago, starting from UBS and some other major banks, they talk about sustainable investing. That is towards L1 side of that chart. Okay. In other words, ESG, or, responsible investing, sustainable investing in business with strong ESG profile. And now, as you can see, actually sustainable investing is making an investment return comparable to that of the traditional market kind of return. And in fact, well-governed organization with proper good ESG track record actually have a higher return than their counterparts without those. So what left in between? Then there are issues. Of course, there are issues like, for example, electric vehicles or green energy. There are people moving toward that, but we need more. We need to drive more capital towards other solutions. What about those children without education, without access to healthcare? These are not readily to be taken up by the market. So that's why impact investing come in, and investing for outcome come in. And from UBS, our position is that I'm coming from the philanthropy team, so the Optimus Foundation, which is actually our philanthropy foundation, servicing our clients. So actually we see it in 2 ways, investing for impact and investing in impact. To be honest, there is no hard and fast, if Anki or Professor correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually no readily available definition on the term impact investing. So for some, with business with intentional social impact, they're already, we see this up and coming. For example, I don't know if you heard about, UBS actually has a launch with a private hedge fund house globally launched the UBS Oncology Fund, working on proof of concept, cancer treatment, and also drugs, kind of private equity investment. Actually, that has been quite successful, with the 2 tranche, launched in 2017. So this is on healthcare, and concepts like these are being taken up by the market. But how about those that I just mentioned? That's why we are here. As you see, nearing my side, we have investing for impact. We make use of social finance, financially sustainable SPO, a special vehicle. And is there any way that we can, through our philanthropic vehicle, to start some project with a mix of philanthropic and private capital? The purpose of philanthropic capital mainly is to de-risk, to start some pilots, and also, to clear some of the obstacles so that, the investment tranche are more readily to come in. We can catalyze those private capital to come in. And then in the process, we'll make use of blended finance, a mix of, philanthropic, private capital, through equity, bonds, convertible bonds, or a mix of those tools to achieve these outcomes. Blended finance actually is a structural approach. It's combined philanthropic and commercial capital. The structuring approach to blend these two, why is it needed? Because it could increase, just like I said, to increase private sector investment in social impact and addressing the financial gap that is needed to address those issues. And ensure the low cost of capital for social entrepreneurs and sufficient protection for investors. For the philanthropists, they have the opportunity to, when they make a donation, instead of a grant making, their patient capital have catalytic function and then can de-risk, and then they also get the chance to get their capital recycled to do more good instead of simply put. Typically, the funding structure on the left-hand side it would involve mobilizing the philanthropic public capital and also the commercial capital. in the different kind of structures. Maybe we can have more time to discuss later on in the session. So all in all, as an individual family, you have a role to play. As an entrepreneur business leader, when you come to us, and then we'll say you obviously have a role to play. And then as an investor, consider investing sustainably and impact investing. Investment that have an explicit intention of generating measurable, verifiable, positive sustainability outcomes. And of course, as a philanthropist, we strongly encourage you to continue what you're doing, but then make a kind of switch in the perspective. Seeing your grant is not just a plain grant, but then it's a patient catalytic capital. So that sums up my presentation. So I'll hand back the time to Enki and the next speaker.
Thank you, Ellen, for the thought-provoking sharing. And may I invite Louis Professor Cheng to the floor.
Good morning. Obviously, my voice is not back to normal yet. Yesterday, I had too much party with the event organizer. It's kidding. I left at 9 o'clock. So really appreciate this opportunity. Have never engaged in any social enterprise events. This is my first time in my life. I'm a very old guy. So it's been a long time. And in this week, I had the opportunity to talk to youth group about ESG and now a social enterprise group. In my previous life, I was at US teaching for 10 years and at PolyU Hong Kong 23 years, and now I'm Hansen U for 3 years. My teaching experience is longer than your life. Most of you are pretty young, handsome, so therefore I'm going to give you some information about when I give talks to mostly about hedge fund firms, buy side. UBS was my constant panelist when we're having the buy side conference before the COVID. So now this is interesting to share with you what I think about impact investing. So here's see if I can. Good. I think Anki introduced me. I was the investment committee member for the pension of Hospital Authority, which 35,000 doctors and nurses in Hong Kong was the contributor of the fund, and that was $8 billion. That was the largest pension fund in Hong Kong. Of course, after I left, many doctors also retired. Now it's only $7 billion. They withdraw money somehow with me because I got a 6 years of term. I'm going to share with you a few things today. I was given the task, imagine emerging trends and opportunities in investment, and some guidelines or maybe my dream, my wishes for purpose-driven companies. And I have about 8 minutes to go. I'm very conscious about that sign, so I will make sure that I will not beyond that signage. There are many ways to define ESG integration in investment, and this is one way that I try to do it. This is similar to the Fidelity graph, so I kind of copy it and make it my own style. On the left-hand side, classic investing is actually blue, which has nothing to do with ESG integration. You don't consider any sustainability goal, just do alpha generation. Alpha means abnormal return or profit. And then you move down to the brown thing, which is the SRI negative screening. SRI means socially responsible investment. It appeared 67 years ago in the US. And basically, you just choose your own value, maybe religious belief, maybe you are Catholic, Christian, Buddhism. You will exclude certain industry. You don't want to invest in those stocks and private equity. And then you just exclude the whole industry. Now we turn to the right-hand side in my computer, which is the ESG exclusion, still negative, still exclusion, but now you choose what stock or what investment to be excluded based upon the ESG rating, which is a step forward. And then move up to the right-hand side, which is the blue background and green wording, which is ESG positive tilt, which now you are engaging a positive screening approach. meaning that you look at the higher ESG rating stocks and vehicles, investment, and then you chose them in your portfolio. Finally, is ESG fully integrated, which I mentioned two types. One is best in class, the other is thematic. Thematic simply means that if the E is your passion, you want to do something on water, the aqua fund, that will be one thing you can do, or you want a social impact, so therefore you choose something will benefit children in Sichuan, so that will be thematic. And best in class, which is the example, I'm not get paid by MSCI as a convenient example. So MSCI has a ESG leader, which choose the best MSCI composite in each industry, and you can invest in that in a passive way. When I was the investment committee member, actually I was a trustee at PolyU, I was a council member at Hamdong. So I pushed PolyU to run ESG stuff. They said, what is it? So then I became an investment committee member at Pension and Hospital Authority. I pushed them for the ESG statement. They said, we didn't have time. So eventually, I kept pushing and pushing, and one day the government called the pension fund. Then suddenly, they said, Louis, we are listening. So eventually, we got some percentage in that portfolio, and the pension fund have the ESG, and started with the ESG statement I wrote. Of course, then I go back to PolyU and say, hey, look, now some large company in Hong Kong have the ESG statement. Why don't you have it? So PolyU eventually have an ESG statement. I don't know where they put it. I couldn't find it. It's somewhere in their prospectus or somewhere in the annual report. And then I was affiliated with the Financial Planning Association in Hong Kong. So I also pushed, about 2 months ago, them to have an ESG statement to educate financial planners in Hong Kong. So I think we start with the mission statement, then you go down, right? So this is how we go. I'm gonna run out of time very soon, so I'm gonna start skipping stuff. And this is just some slide that in case you cannot sleep, you can just imagine one ship, two ships, and then you go to sleep. And now, this is something very important. It's called materiality. I want you to remember this page and the next page. Again, we follow the 80-20 rule. Whatever I say today, most of them you can forget. But 20% you should remember. This is one of the 20% you should remember. Whatever ESG integration passion you have to choose what makes the most impact. So therefore, what is material in the company in terms of E and S and G pillar? We call them pillars. And then within each pillar, we have major issues. So you have to focus, for example, in airline, that the material issue for environmental will be the greenhouse gases emission. For the social pillar will be labor practices. And then for the G, with competitive behavior, antitrust, price fixing, stuff like that. So you have to look at what kind of material issue for the stuff you invest in, and then focus on that mostly, because it's not equally important for all the elements. And then, this is the page I want to spend the remaining 3 minutes on. Since the development of GRI, Global Reporting Institute, which is the first organization that started talking about the ESG reporting guideline for listed firms. And they talk about materiality on impact, real impact, like carbon reduction, like water pollution, like biodiversity, things like that. But then the SASB, which is the US driven, and then become ISSB, which you don't have to know what they are. They talk about financial materiality. The bottom line also matters. So now we push for double, but oh sorry, I have a big finger, I'm gonna put down. They talk about double materiality. It means that whenever you invest in a company, you have to think about both perspectives. Financial materiality, which is what you will invest in. For example, I did 2 papers recently on the US REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. The US people don't care about environment, I can say that, I don't care, right? So therefore, when the US investor buy the US REIT, if the company put a lot of environmental effort into the building they own, the stock price actually go down. So they would actually prefer a company that put money into where would maximize rental yield. So therefore, we found that in the US paper, the materiality issue is environment and green for the US REIT, but that doesn't help to generate alpha. Company that actually put more money in S and G, make the ESG rating higher. I call it ESG gaming or strategy. They actually make the stock price better, and the institutional investors will buy them more. That was at least 15 years of data, stopped at 2021. So my conclusion here is, if you care only about financial materiality, you forget about real materiality. I think that's not right, especially for this forum. So therefore, both should be considered. I'm going to skip over to the last slide. I think that at the end of the day, money is power. Why we are here today? Because we believe that using impact investing is a way to mobilize people to think more about environment and social agenda. So therefore, use our money wisely. This is called a green bond investment loop. And anyway, that means that you can use the money to do something. The last slide here is actually some advertisement I have. We are organizing some ESG seminar that in November sometime. I forgot, it's the last page. You can hopefully join us if you are in Hong Kong. And this is what we do. We get some government funding, about $1 million to run 4 seminars. My job is to combine FinTech AI with ESG. How do we do it? This is a simple Python 3D visualization, looking at how we can look at sentiment. Sentiment means, for example, the negative sentiment, the positive sentiment from newspaper reflecting. That's AI driven. And then we have the ESG score on the y-axis. I think I have negative 1 minute. 1 minute, thank you. All right. Okay. And then you can look at the left-hand side. We have the media from mainstream news, such as Wall Street Journal, China Daily, South China Morning Post. Right-hand side, actually social media, like WeChat, Tencent, all this social media. And one thing, if I want to leave you one thought, the last thing you want to remember from my talk, you forget everything else, you push the button and get your round 0. You can look at the right-hand side. There's some color balls, which is every ball is one company. The color ball, the solid ball, about 511 of them. The hollow ball is actually Hong Kong Stock 300 for comparison. I think we can conclude that there are more. This zone with color ball, this is negative social media. It means that when you are a KOL, when you want to get attention, you can backmouth Alibaba, Tencent, large company, you get attention. But you won't backmouth the smaller firm, which is not relevant in your radar. So how a large company can manage the negative social media that criticize you for no reason, that is today's battle for corporations. I have done some research with the investor relations, and this is the headache. I've talked to a lot of investor relations head, including Tencent's head, and they told me that every day somebody badmouth them for things that 100,000 employee, one person suicidal, that's your fault. So that will be something challenging. I'm going to stop here, and hopefully that some question will continue on this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. I think Louis is a bit modest in setting the 20% target for everyone in the room. So I hope everyone can have key takeaways and driving up that ratio up to 100%. On that note, on an ambitious note, last but not least, we have Alvin. I'd like to invite you to join us on the floor. Thank you, Alvin.
All right, hello, good morning everyone. I'm Alvin, and I'm just here, I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to actually jump quite quickly into the Q&A. I think that'll be more dynamic. I don't have a lot to present, honestly, but I do want to just to kind of bring up some ideas around why I think that there is hope. I know that we live in a world where we're watching news and it's not always very positive, and there's a lot of talk about, the climate crisis as well, really dragging a lot of us down. But I do want to bring up the fact that there is hope, and I'll give you some figures around that. Just before I begin, I just want to give a quick intro about myself. So I represent ANF Family Office, our family office based in Asia, and I look after the impact investing carve-out portfolio. So we do the 100% ESG and impact investing with this carve-out as an experiment to look at whether the different types of investment products and crafting out a portfolio can generate the financial and the social environmental returns that we seek. We invested in a wide range of different products like private equity, private credit, microfinance, even into direct ventures as well. And we have multiple themes like decarbonization, animal welfare, we have water, sanitation, healthcare, food technologies, and so forth. On the side, well, it's my full-time thing now, but I'm also a PhD researcher in public policy here at HKUST. I'm mainly researching and investigating on how policy can shape sustainable consumption in a mega city context like Hong Kong. I think I'd like to use a lot of research and insights to think about ways that we can transition to more sustainable consumption patterns. I think this is one way that we could bring about systemic change. And of course, I'm speaking as a funder at the moment, but I also used to run several social enterprises. So I do know the flip side of the difficulties of running a social enterprise is trying to prove that you can make business sense and also social sense as well. As I mentioned, there's a lot of gloom, right? Already we saw some figures around the SDG funding gap, around $4 trillion per year, much higher than what it was meant to be. It was estimated at first that we needed 2.5 trillion. The number is growing, and this gap has widened because of global events, right? As a key component. So we're thinking about pandemic, we're thinking about the Ukraine war, conflict, we're looking at things like messy US elections that are throwing agendas off. We have contentious political leaders who are very loud against particular environmental progress and so forth. And the private capital flow is also very low, right? We saw the number and it was 1 trillion. But in my view, it's nowhere near enough. I think private wealth owners hold a lot more. And they can also be a signal to governments to also move their capital too. So there's a huge role for private capital to play. Unfortunately, a lot of private investors also think about the market a lot, their returns and what they should invest in. The past year or so has been really difficult for the financial markets with the interest rates, and everyone's balancing their portfolios, newly injected fear into their investment strategies. So it's always an uphill battle to try and fight against all these headwinds and make investment decisions for private funders. I also do emphasize that public investments are also very much needed. There's a huge gap for public leaders, public sector leaders, political leaders to actually mobilize capital. In my view, there's not nearly enough of that. Political leadership, given the election cycles and so forth, always just gets distracted by all the politics. I think we need to put that aside. And the spirit of SDGs is that it's meant to be a global effort to put all your political priorities aside and let's focus on tackling this collectively. So I hope that the political leaders around the world can think in that spirit again and make good decisions moving forward. So this is a huge opportunity. And meanwhile, the great wealth transfer is happening. So over the next 20 years, $72 trillion will be passed down to Gen X and also millennials, eventually Gen Z as well. I deliberately expanded the number trillion in case we forgot how many zeros that is. It is 12 zeros, so it is a lot of potential capital that could be used for impact. So the millennials will be the largest wealth owners in the history of humanity. There is good news. On the consumer side, 93% of millennials consider sustainability when making online purchases. So before they even make decisions about finances, there's something that they think about already in their head. And 73% would actually pay more, right? So there's even a concession would not stop them from thinking about this. Now, in terms of business values, 88% of millennials and Gen Z say that the company's purpose for which they work for matters a lot. This is how they're picking their future employers and so forth. And companies definitely have they believe that the companies have a responsibility to address these issues, right? They're in a much higher, greater power than an individual as an employee themselves. So companies and businesses can play a huge role. And lastly, young investors, 9 in 10 millennials want to invest in ways in which their investments align with their own social and environmental values. These are really high percentages, by the way. And so there is hope, okay, there is hope. And in the context of family offices, also, the owners of vast wealth, next gens are paving the way. So in light of, the speak about Gen Zs, about millennials, next gens are trailblazing in many ways when it comes to allocating capital for impact. So a lot of surveys show that they have a strong interest in really adopting different strategies like ESG, active impact investing, and even transforming their own family businesses, right? So if the family traditionally is in a very traditional sector like shipping or trading or in agriculture, there are so many ways for you to transform your supply chain, your operations, your hiring practices, your governance generally, to really be a 21st century company, right? That the millennials and the Gen Zs want. And so we're also seeing a huge trend in Hong Kong's next gens, really paving the way for impact. So we have, I'm sure there are families in next gens who are, for example, in the apparel business with textiles, and they started massive incubators and spaces for different social enterprises, eco-enterprises to thrive. Also other next gens who've created like platforms and co-working spaces that aggregate other social entrepreneurs and provide training for them as well. So a lot of work is driven by Next Gen's passion in transforming the old ways of doing business and also investing. So if there was a genie in the world, and if I could be granted 3 wishes, what would it be? This is the world I want to see, right? I don't know how many years later on this would be, but my first wish is that all businesses will be social and eco businesses. No exceptions, right? That we all care about these values, and it's deeply embedded, integrated into the business. In fact, it will be the core of why these businesses are being founded. That's what I'd love to see. And obviously, investors, consumers can play a role in demanding this, right? We can say, I prefer a brand that does this and that, right? Now, my second wish is that all investments would be impact investments, impactful ones. And here I say it's not just the private ones, right, in financial markets, but also how your governments are investing. Your pension funds, right, and your large amounts of investments, foreign direct, whatever. These can also be for impact. I'd love to see that, a phase out of the sectors that we'd like to exclude, but also an integration and active role in promoting, incentivizing investments that make an impact. Now, lastly, I'd love it if the bottom line was progress and not profit. I don't know how it happened that capitalism made it so that all these businesses, all these investors are chasing profit. That money was the currency which we live to acquire. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that we need to rethink what we're chasing, businesses, consumers, investors. Ultimately, until the day we die, like what are we pursuing? And I'd love for it to be progress and not profit. These are really grand wishes. I hope someone could grant them, but unfortunately that's not how it works. I think it's a global collective effort. And so I hope this is also the vision that you see. So yeah, please join me in making sure that these wishes come true. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. I think I speak for everyone in the room that we all too wish that your wishes will manifest for the greater good of humanity. So thank you for that. So for the interest of digging deeper on today's topic on impact investing, I'd like to transition to the panel discussion, which will help create a much more enriched, dynamic conversation on today's topic. And mind you, as a reminder, when we talk about impact investing today, we'll also cover other concepts surrounding impact investing. So sustainable investing, blended finance, ESG investing are all notions we'll be touching on today. So the first question goes to all the panelists. Impact investing, as we all know, has gained momentum over the years. But what keeps it exciting and promising for you individually? What are some of the up-and-coming sectors or trends that you have observed from each of your respective roles? Maybe we can start with Alvin, then Louis, and Ellen.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. And I think it would be an extension of what I presented just now. And even in my research, I like to focus on consumer demand. Mostly because I think it's really difficult to try and nudge a lot of the leaders and businesses. It takes a lot for them to change course. But consumers have their values very loud and clear. And so I think from that consumer demand side, I see a bit of hope there. So yeah, I think, in terms of like consumption patterns, I think we're seeing cultural shifts, right? I mean, if we think back, 10 years ago, were vegetarian diets common, right? Did we talk about plastic waste or single use or circularity? Like these concepts were not sexy. They were not talked about 10 years ago. But I think now it's, increasingly so that we recognize that there are needs. We are more aware, more woke about these issues that are pervasive in our society. And I think what I'm really glad about, at least today, is that when we say ESG, I think everyone already knows what it means, right? That is already a huge start, I think. Because then if we place the power with the people again, then businesses will transform because of that. Governments will transform because of that, right? So yeah, I'd like to think that the sort of louder voice allows for this sort of transformation. And in the best way also is that even if it doesn't create direct impact immediately, at least in society there's discourse, right? There's discussion, we're talking about it, we're debating about it. What we should pursue, what is right, what is wrong. There's a lot of debate around this. And this is how societies are formed, right? We talk about this stuff. So I'd like to, I think at the moment we're still in early stage compared to maybe other places where such conversations are much more advanced, like the US or Europe. But I think we're catching up really quickly. And once we hit the tipping point, everyone realizes that this is the way to go. I don't think there's any stopping. I think it's going to keep going full steam ahead.
My understanding of the question that Anki asked was, what will be the interesting thing about ESG? What will be interesting about impact investing? What's the passion that currently we should consider? So my answer is, think about all this goal, 30-60. 30, we do this, 60, we have carbon neutrality, net zero. How do you get there? So to me, this year, the theme of my center is transition management. Energy transition. And that's not just talk about carbon reduction. I'm organizing a panel in December at the Stock Exchange. And we invited the famous energy economist in the US and I talked to him, his good friend, Jim Smith. And they said, what would be the thing that you want to talk to people that don't understand energy? They said, think about this. The world's getting hotter. 1.5 Celsius is not going to be able to make it, will be higher temperature. So think about place going to be colder, they now need air conditioning. That place where they don't need to wear this like thin clothes for these dry fit clothes, now they would like to do that. So lifestyle consumption, like I've mentioned, all this technology required to make people live better under a high temperature of the planet, that should be something considered. Of course, he's the economist. So he said that, well, in transition planning, if you put more money into energy transition technology, produce less waste, less carbon, you have less money capital investment into the lifestyle consumption. So I think that for social enterprises, for how we're going to engage people's demand, will be something you can consider.
Thank you, Louis.
Testing. Well, I think both speakers has actually answered most part of the question. The only point that I want to further add on is you mentioned about sectors, and from what we see from here is actually, in health sector, education, of course, climate, just like Louis just mentioned. These are all the sectors that gain traction in areas of impact investing. And another trend that we, as a financial institution, from what we see, where we're standing at, observe is the increasing, blurring line between investment and philanthropy, just like a continuation of in the earlier presentation that I shared. Because traditionally, people, they make money from their businesses, and then they make a grant to support, climate change, so on and so forth. But then they doesn't care, that business, they may have something that's actually polluting that, separate. The two things are separate. But then now you see a blurring line. On business side, they're doing their part, to try to, bring everything in line with ESG. And then on philanthropy side, they just walk the walk and also talk the talk. And that's the blurring line that we see, and also an increasing use of, these kind of different capital to achieve the purpose. The topic that I just mentioned about the blended finance, the notion. So this is another trend that I observed,
Thank you everyone. It's always interesting to hear different perspectives representing across sectors as well, because we have a very cross-sectoral panel today. But of course, when we talk about the potential of any market and the hope of growth of impact investing, it also comes with another sort of current, which is the challenges. The challenges that hinder the potential of impact investing. So to kind of hone in on this point a little bit, for the next question, I want to ask specifically on the challenges of scaling impact investing. And perhaps we can ask Alvin, as a seasoned impact investor, from your perspective, with the requirements you're looking at when it comes to impact investing, and it has to do with investments meeting certain risk-reward profiles, duration, returns, etc. What are your thoughts on some of the key challenges in scaling impact investments? And it could be within the Asia context and global.
Yeah, a huge understatement, right? That there are challenges in this sector. So this is a very new term, impact investing, and a very relatively novel concept. It's picked on really quickly, I think, and particularly by those who want to use their capital for impact, right? So a lot of impact investors have wanted to seek a lot of impactful social, environmental ventures. They want to invest in a lot of ESG products. I'm sure in the context of UBS, a lot of clients are also demanding this as well. One of the challenges that investors are saying and somewhat complaining about is that the pipeline, in terms of the supply of social enterprises, is not enough, or that they're not of particular high quality, right? And but I mean, I think it has to be transitioned because it's a completely new system. You can even say it's a new asset class with its new risk return profile. What I'd like to see is for investors to not use the same old metrics of VC-like returns and the timeline, it's going to get me quick cash flow and so forth, to judge social and eco enterprises. I think in itself, because it's bringing extra value than a typical corporate, it needs more time, right? It needs more support, more resources than ever. And so we're, the capital that goes into the pipeline needs to be catalytic capital, right? Where they do really need the funding to fund like a pilot or take something that's a bit higher risk, so that they don't have to risk everything. The founders don't have to place all their bets into this one thing, and someone else can help them pick up this funding need. And also it needs to be patient in the dimension of time, right? So we need to give years. We don't need to seek hockey stick exponential growth from the get-go. And I think because of this, entrepreneurs are also finding it very difficult. Like, how do I position myself? How do I speak to funders and investors and VCs? If I'm telling them I'll only get them their first cash back in 5 years or 8 years, right? But the impact is immediate. So I think it requires a rethink of investor and also the founders' expectation management, right? Communicate what you're looking for and don't expect your own risk-return profile onto the entrepreneurs. In a sense, that's quite unfair. So I think, everyone, in an ideal world, everyone wants this field to grow as much as possible, to scale as fast as possible. I think we just have to be realistic that certain sort of mentalities are sticky, right? Investors are still seeking high returns. But we need to completely rethink our relationship with capital, how the VC world works, how private equity works. How do we structure financial products or offerings so that it aligns with these different goals. Yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough, and there are a lot of headwinds. One thing I do hope is also policy to drive a sort of at least the will, right? The education, the awareness, but the will to actually want to be an impact investing hub. I think that signals to a lot of financial institutions and scholars to pursue these areas in a much faster way with incentives. Yeah. So a multi-pronged approach, I think that needs to be it. Shotgun approach, there's no silver bullet. Of course, I'd like to see it grow even faster. You're right. Yeah.
Thanks, Alvin. Definitely multi-pronged approach for sure. Ellen, I just want to invite you to chime in on this from your perspective, sitting within UBS. What is the view on scaling impact, or in better words, in UBS's words, scaling capital towards impact?
Well, at UBS, I think when we globally, by the way, we have 9 offices around the world. It's not just APAC. We have our foundation branches or headquarters in Zurich, of course, and Europe and in the US. And in Asia, we also have offices in Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and China have a representative office. So when we assess programs, actually, I had an occasion to speak to a group of hedge funds, COO, CIO yesterday, and then when they asked about how do you look at programs when you evaluate programs or be it traditional fund grant making programs or on impact investing. So I said the key things that you look at is scale first of all. Whether there's a potential for scaling up. Just like the example that I mentioned at the very beginning about scholarship, it's a very useful tool, no doubt, and we do encourage everyone. If you have the philanthropic capital, do go ahead. Nothing should stop you. But if given the spaces and time, consider this. Instead of supporting scholarships, is there any way, for example, we can explore like something called what we call it's not a new innovation from us, but then something has been implemented elsewhere called ISA, Income Sharing Agreement, that ties the students' repayment of student loans with their employability. That means students who are able to secure better employment after graduation, then they repay certain percentage of their student loans back to us, after they graduate. And then if they can't unfortunately get employment for the time being, okay, you can give a certain grace period for them, him or her. And further, what about we ask some of these academic institutions to underwrite certain risks, by providing certain type of underwriting risk-taking capital. So we are making them a stakeholder. So in that way, it's not just they offering programs, to these students who borrow student loans, but then when they offer, be it a degree or coding courses, in these underdeveloping nations, they have to consider what actually the market needs for these students because they have stake in it. So, this is one example, illustrating when we look at it, how we look at scale. We look for different ways, how to try to, grow the market, grow the capital at scale. This is one example. And of course, and I consider showing the slides, the impact loan is also, some of the things that we have tried and I think well proven in the past period. We have this impact loan. Basically, it's a contract, it's an outcome-based contract. So instead of paying for activity, traditionally you pay for activities. We care about how many teachers trained, how many schools were built, how many students have bridged. But how about learning outcomes? Have they really increased, in terms of their performance academically, in their math, in their literacy? So is there any way that we can measure and make the payment based on outcome? For example, like the example the listener about, for example, educate girls. Basically, it look at eventually how many girls can receive education and graduate and find an employment instead of how many teachers trained, how many schools were built. So these kind of things, and very often not just the NGO to carry out, execute a service, to show the numbers, but we got it independently verified. So this is one of the examples, in impact investing, very often we look at, how we scale up and then how we got evidence-based, kind of data. These are very important in the process, and I think it's also relevant to the concept of impact investing.
Thank you, Ellen. And so let's continue a little bit more on the challenges of growing more impact investing, because on the flip side, there's also a growing trend of greenwashing and impact washing. And so this is a question I'd like to direct to Louis, Professor Chang. From your perspective and your vast experience in the ESG space, what are your thoughts specifically on green, stroke impact washing, especially for the context in Hong Kong as we're still trying to navigate in growing more of this, impact and sustainable investments?
Thank you for this great question. And if you have a bunch of European investors in the room, sorry, you're part of it. And you will say that we have too much ESG washing. So we have the ESG hashing, we have to do Article 6 now, Article 8, Article 9. You don't do what you say, we're going to give you a big penalty from the EU. Fine, that was EU and Europe. US, North America. But Hong Kong, to me, Asia now, we are learning how to say properly what your company, what your organization is doing on ESG. So do not hush it. Say whatever you want to say. Learn what is the optimal balance between what you have done and what you have spoken. I talked to a Switzerland ESG fund manager, and he said that the trick he used in the past, making a lot of money out of a generation for ESG integration in his portfolio, is to find ESG doer. Then you make them talk, become ESG talker. By doing that, you will review the appropriate ESG premium in the asset pricing. The value of the stock goes up, they just review what they have done in the past. So therefore, this is certainly in the Asia space we should do. Do not be afraid that you talk too much. Of course, if you know you talk too much, you should not, but if you have no idea, try until somebody says that you actually have not done that. But okay, I don't understand. You adjust by making mistakes and error so that you now can help Asia and Hong Kong people to know that we actually done a lot of things. It's not just with no idea what's going on. Of course, education is important. I want to add one sentence here, what Alvin is mentioning. I think benchmarking is very important. The risk profile should not be just return, but you can think about ESG profile, and this is some work we've been doing. If you ask all the asset owner, you ask the philanthropist, you ask them, if you want to do this passion, how much percentage is worth to you? It's not saying that you lose money or you earn less, you say that you earn the real impact. So create ESG profile for every type of ESG asset owner, that preference for certain aspect. Then you will propose this package of branding. I think that's much easier to say that you earn 2% less alpha by doing this social agenda. I think that's the thinking process we should go through.
Thank you, Louis. And Alvin, during our prep call, we did have a conversation about this. I know you have some interesting thoughts to share. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the dimensions that we also need to think about is urgency of the issues that we're talking about, right? So if we're thinking about climate, about equality, equity, conflict, I think a lot of this stuff, we can't afford to wait, right? For a perfect solution, 100% perfect solution. For every single corporate to do the right thing. I think there will be greenwashing in the beginning, and just companies trying out, as Louis said, really testing out the waters to see where the lines are drawn. And I think it is also a question of whether the ends justify the means. So if you're greenwashing, but in the end, the overall outcome, if we think from a utilitarian point of view, does the overall net benefit justify that there has been greenwashing in the process, right? Disclaimer, I don't support greenwashing in the sense that, they are saying something that they're not doing. But I do find that there are benefits to greenwashing. This is a hot take, but
Controversial.
I think there are net benefits to greenwashing. Professor, come on, it's okay. We're on the same side. But it's like almost weekend. So I think at the front, first and foremost, I think at least it allows consumers, stakeholders, to really get a take on, to be aware of what they mean, what they're talking about, right? Like if some company says they care about plastic issues or they're trying to go circular, but they're not really, consumers are looking at that, right? Your employees are looking closely at what you're doing. So there's that as well. At the same time, on a societal level, there's more conversation about this. If a big company puts up their hand, waves a flag, suddenly everyone's looking. Suddenly people are talking about it. It is in the political discourse, society is talking about it, NGOs are scrutinizing them, journalists are onto their game. Same with regulators, right? If you talk loud, you say you're doing all these great things, regulators will jump on, right? And try and say, okay, I think you crossed the line, that's false advertising, you did not do what you said you would do, that's greenwashing. So all of this is a good sort of regulatory balance. And I think while the process of greenwashing I do not support, if anyone wants to greenwash, please don't. But I think, unfortunately, people will do that. But it does bring competition. Your rival company would try and beat you and do better than you. And then it starts a whole wave of change. Because in the counterfactual, in the parallel universe where no one ever greenwashed, no one ever took the first step, no one tried to take any risk in using these arguments as a benefit, there will be no progress at all, right? So if you compare these two worlds, I'd like to see a world that at least, even if the process was flawed, we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you both.
Just wanted to add, and I can see where that comment's coming from, and I'm also echoing Louis' comment. And even in different industries, not just hotels, circular, in the circular economy, but then in banks, we also have actually in Europe, you can call it a movement of principles of responsible banking. And simply put in layman terms, it's something like, for example, when you're doing credit business with oil refinery industry, we are particularly polluting, or like our banks, when we talk about investment requirement, starting position is about sustainable investment, starting position. So even in the financial industry, we have rules and I think regulators obviously play a very important role. And just to chip in on that,
Thanks, Alan. So let's turn our discussion to a bit of a broader perspective on the issue of ecosystem building, because the issues we're talking about today, whether it be climate, inequality, they're so large and vast that not one organization or sector alone can tackle that. And so I'd like to ask the panelists here, again, sitting from your respective roles in very different sectors, what are your thoughts on the roles of the public sector, the roles of academia, the roles of civil society and private sector? How can we come together to work together? How can we come together, collaborate, and tackle these pressing issues? And more importantly, if we could bring this point closer to home, how can we help build Hong Kong towards a much more dynamic, sustainable hub for greater impact and sustainable investing? Shall we start with Ellen, Louis, and Alvin?
Well, I think the issue is, I think the question is, how different stakeholders or players like civil society at large, the government, of course, and then private sector. And first of all, for government, of course, obviously, policy does matter. You look at Singapore, they got, just one example, they recently got in their sort of allowable investment under, the family office scheme that is very popular in Singapore, attracting capital and also attracting immigration. And then they recently allow blended finance as one of the allowable kind of investment in these kind of rules. So that's one simple move from the government can make, big impact. And then I remember in Louis' presentation, you mentioned about chasing, people to pension fund to add in an ESG statement. What better ways than the government say, okay, one day give a call to the official and say, where is your ESG statement? And then next day they turn to you for help. So I guess, obviously policy does help. And actually from the experience of Optimist Foundation working elsewhere, and some of these, apart from policy, some of the governments, around the world, like for example, Singapore Temasek or in UK, or they make use of these development finance agency, as catalytic capital to start with. So these are another area our government may also look at. And for civil society at large, I think education, public education are very important. Philanthropist side, we talk about, how to see your philanthropic capital. It's not just a charity money, but then you look at it, it has some weight. It not just, you not just do good and feel good for yourself, but it has a catalytic effort, to help the private sector to, drive more money in. And then I think shifting the paradigm, turning this mindset around will be very important. Yeah.
I have two suggestions for the government. So, one, I think we should help SMEs. Social enterprises mostly comprised of SMEs. In the Big Bay area, a lot of SMEs. In Asia, under UN ESCAP, 90% to 95% of some Asian developing countries actually from SMEs. So how SMEs can do a better job in submitting quality information to the bank and to the financier so that they can get money with cheaper financing. To me, SME have no knowledge, no money, they're tired all the time, they're making ends meet. They need government support to have platform for information transparency, easy to use by industry sector specific platform so that they can enter information into a big data format. So machine learning AI can help us to screen out who can pay back without just looking at you have collateral or bricks and mortar. The second aspect I think the government can do is more than ESG, because think about it, Hong Kong stock market claimed to be an Asian financial center. The US investor are gone, European investor are on the sideline. We need liquidity. That's bigger than ESG. So I've been talking to a lot of people, including the stock exchange and regulators. We need to revive liquidity in Hong Kong stock market. And one thing we can do it is to enhance the ESG transparency for the Hong Kong stocks. Since I'm not in finance, I'm going to ask the question, if you are my students, how many stocks listed in Hong Kong? Do you know approximately? 2,700 stocks. But actually, beyond 600 stocks, there are no trading. There are 2,000 something stocks. So the question I want to ask is, in order to have ESG transparency, helping Hong Kong, green bond, green everything, you have to have liquidity. Without trading, there's no sell-side commission, nobody cares about the stock. Even ESG will not be covered by MSCI, UBS, and S&P. So therefore, the solution gotta be the government to help liquidity, enhancing ESG transparency for the smaller stocks. They're not small, smaller. So therefore, more people trade in stocks. That's my suggestion.
It's a tough one. I think the three sectors, broadly speaking, the public sector, private sector, and civil society, I think they each play different roles that all add up to, it's like they're each one prong, and they add up to a three-pronged approach when it comes to advancing impact investing. I think on the one hand, obviously, there's a lot of talk about the word investing, but I think a lot of it is impact as well. So the NGOs and civil society are extremely important in being there as a service deliverer and as those who can document the exact needs of communities, right? And also even scholars who are trying to seek out the evidence of particular societal and environmental ills, right? And then, of course, on the other hand, private sector can come in with the right funding, with the right resources to develop innovative solutions and products and services that can address these issues. But that alone isn't enough because you're just one company, right? So then, of course, then the public sector, policymakers really have a huge role to incentivize the whole ecosystem. And I'm just giving the example of electric vehicles, right? So we know electric vehicles bring a lot of benefits to roadside air pollution, to the safety issues, to obviously the carbon aspect. But without the Teslas, without the larger companies, BYD, could we have seen this sort of growth in EVs? Could we have transitioned cities so quickly? But without policymakers, without the infrastructure, urban planning, building your charging stations, giving incentives to the buyers of the cars and tax breaks for the companies, would EVs have become popular, right? So I think it takes a village. I think it takes everyone working towards the same goal, towards the same purpose. And I think ultimately it goes down to the question of leadership, really, on every level. So whether this is political leaders, the key policymakers, the so-called policy entrepreneurs who take an issue and drive it, or even business leaders, right? Even in Hong Kong, in the Hong Kong context, tycoon families with huge power and influence. All they need to do is just say, okay, this is what we want to do, and a lot of things can happen. So a lot of it goes down to leadership and the will to actually want to drive change and doing it in the right way. At the moment, I don't see as much. I feel like we're, here in Hong Kong, very distracted by a lot of things. I don't think we have, enough leadership to tip the scale and to move the needle as yet. So I think if there's one thing I would do, I would urge leaders, I would train leaders if I could, and really nudge them and convince them that this is the right thing to do. Yeah. I think that's the biggest single point of power if I could change things at the moment.
Definitely takes a village to really create a robust impact and sustainable economy in Hong Kong, and hopefully we have the village in this room today to help build it. I think we have just a little bit of time left for a very quick question, let's say 30 seconds or less for the panelists, and it's really for the people in the room who are interested in sparking their own journey towards impact and probably even impact investing as well. So any quick advice for members in the room?
I think if you remember my 20%, the dual materiality, I think social enterprise is already embedded your passion and your wisdom into build impact. So how can you get the financial impact, which is what Alex mentioned. We call it venture philanthropy, which you have to look at giving back to society, but make sure that you meet the bottom line. That takes some finance training.
So I would say, don't be afraid. Don't let bad news drown out our passion. I know it seems like a really uphill climb. I know it seems like it's a very uncertain path. But I think we're very lucky right now in 2023. It is not a new path, right? It has been paved. We have had people trailing, blazing the trail already. And so don't be afraid. There are lots of role models, lots of organizations already working around this. Keep your passion. Don't let anyone put out that fire, is what I would say.
It's my turn to, if I were Harry Potter, have a magic wand, moment. And I would have thought, if I deal with high net wealth individuals, I also deal with various NGO institutions. I would have thought if there's one thing I could have changed is that I hope overnight that can be built something called trusted philanthropy, where there can be open communications between them. Because oftentimes I heard from NGO sides, they complain, why don't they just invest in an unrestricted funding, support our operating expenses is very important, it's like a bread and butter. But on the other side, the philanthropists are very puzzled. Why am I not supposing I should use my capital to help those most needed people, the beneficiaries. So 100% should go to them instead of these overheads. But then, be patient if you're the NGOs, if you're the grantee side, be patient. And if you're the philanthropist side, be more open-minded and listen to them, build this trust-based philanthropy, which happens to be one of the top 5, things that we listed out in UBS 2023 philanthropy trends that we want to see. If there's one magic wand, then that's what I want to happen.
Great, thank you to all the panelists. And on this very positive and encouraging note, we now conclude the panel discussion. So we'll open the floor up to any questions, any burning questions, any comments you'd like to provide to any of the topics we talked about. Please raise your hand, and we will have members of the staff coming around with a mic. So,
Hi, my name is Sarah. Thank you for the insightful sharing. I do have a question about the scalability that Alan mentioned. What size is a good size for investing in Hong Kong in this market that would attract the NGOs or social enterprises as well as the investors? Thank you.
I'll start first and then see anyone want to chip in. This is, if you look at the impact loan bond size, actually they are not substantial astronomical amount that we are looking at. But then when we look at scale, I would have thought it's not just about the capital amount, but then the impact side, whether you can scale up. I take an example, we see very often in some of these programs that we came across, in Jamshedpur, they've been implementing this program, but on the other side of the island, by the way, we were a small island, and they're implementing a similar model, but then they sort of, because they didn't know that somebody else is experimenting something and accumulated a wealth of experience already, so they're sort of reinventing the wheel, and then, just very often from our side, from our perspective, we see the same thing happening and the same pitfall sometimes also happening over and over again. So when we think that, at scale, of course capital, but then you can see the real example is actually not an astronomical amount, but then this impact, whether it can scale across the territory, if you took the example of Hong Kong, is what really matters in my view. I don't know if that answers your question or other speakers.
anyone else would like to chime in?
I would say it would be very industry specific, but to me, the model by UNC, public-private partnership, PPP, will be something important because there's no single social enterprise can raise money just like the PE, venture capital, that funding size is too big, there's a lot of overhead. To me, it should be supported by charity like Jockey Club or supported by the government funding so that when you have some wisdom, some product, you need something, a platform to kick off your product, your services, they provide funding, you provide a decent plan, the money will be sustainable in the future. I think there's no way independently that any social enterprise can start something with the funding size required for any product. Of course, we talk about Leonine, it's a different story.
Yeah, so I would agree with both speakers that I think scale is not about the amount per venture, like, are they a unicorn or whatever. I think it's much more about the proportion of ventures or proportion of businesses that are doing ESG or that are doing good. So in my view, not all companies need to be unicorns, right? They shouldn't all be able to give you 5x, 10x. Some of them would just give you 1 or 2x, over 10 years, and that would be very, very low returns, right, for a startup. But that's how we need to think about it. I think there's a whole new asset class of ventures here that have very unique characteristics when embedding impact and environmental metrics. And so, to me, it's not about that we have like very good unicorns and we have some very good PE funds that are investing in them. It's more about, okay, right now 2% of all businesses started this year are social enterprises, but can we get that number up to 10, to 20? And in my vision, in my wish, it's 100, right? I think to me that is scale. We can have all small businesses in the world, but if 100% of them are impactful, that is that is the biggest scale we can get. That's how I would think of it. Yeah.
Professor Orianto Chandra first, and then the lady at the back.
Yeah, thank you. We are in the Social Enterprise Summit, and we all know that social enterprise is a beautiful concept, just as ESG is also a very beautiful concept, but what we see out there in terms of very large-scale empirical research that people have done, that it's a lot more challenging, very challenging to run social enterprises well, and that's why Professor Luis said, not so many social enterprises are really, doing really scaled operations. So going back to that, the idea of combining multiple objectives or goals in one organization, so in which a social enterprise needs to achieve social and commercial performance at the same time, it's been very challenging. And research after research have shown that the performance of social enterprises, they always have to prioritize financial survival first so that they can create the outcome. So what you have at the end is that social enterprises that are unable to achieve more social goals because they are not so successful financially. So they become like a low growth or lowly profitable organizations in a sense because of that achieving double goals, right? Or they are not able to achieve more financially because they think a lot about social. So the problem with that is it's not about balancing multiple goals. It becomes a trade-off of multiple goals. So you have to prioritize one goal over the other. So I think that is one of the challenges. And I just want to hear, like, if you look at ESG, it's just a scaled-up version of a social enterprises. In the same way that these publicly listed organizations are embracing multiple goals. They want to be profitable, they want to do good socially and environmentally. But again, the thing is, how is it going to be really possible? And I think one of the gaps here is really from the shareholders and also from consumers, in which the average shareholders, average consumers are not there yet. In for example, trading off, getting, for example, if you normally get 7% profit, now are you ready to accept 3% profit? But this can create social value. Or you want to get a certain social value, but you get a different level of financial return that you would normally receive without the social. So do consumers and do shareholders or investors are willing to accept those trade-offs? So I think that is always the key part.
A question about trade-off. Louis, would you like to tackle that?
About 10, 12 years ago, I organized a NGO conference in PolyU. I started evaluating Hong Kong NGOs. I was invited to talk to Mr. Choi. I think he will hate me after this public speech. That realized that the problem of Hong Kong social enterprises, including NGOs, is they get government money. And the project is not exactly synchronized with your major theme. So in US, it's very clear. You declare whatever sector, I found 12 sector, 13 sector, they're very different social agenda. But in Hong Kong, it's multiple, it's like 10, 12. I have no idea what is the corporate identity because you do a cat shelter, you do little kid, you do education for computer for kids, you do cafeteria. So my problem is, in order to be focused, I don't think multi-directive will be good for Hong Kong. You're going to focus on E or S or a little bit crossover if there's a chance, but not driven by the government funding, whatever project will give you because you have 10 staff to pay for the payroll, so they will do whatever you don't understand. And I think that is the problem in Hong Kong. We need to be more focused.
Thank you. So there's one more question. Am I missing any hands over there? Okay, one question.
Hi, my name is Jackie, and I would like to talk a little bit about health and well-being. Because it is also a very important part for the sustainability of our community, right? So when we are talking about sustainability, we also need to really talk about the well-being of human. Given that pandemic has already given us a negative impact on our mental status, like anxiety, fear, and also insecurity, given that the upcoming aging populations, the government is talking about the big policy about preventive medicine. Given that the latest research in Oxford and Stanford, they prove that the young people are facing a lot of mental health problems like depressions, And my question is, do you think the well-being of human well-beings should be one of the very important emerging trends for the sustainability in the coming 3 years? And do you have any successful stories about your impactful investing in this area? And if not, what would you looking for in this area?
Thank you for linking our session today to the general topic of our Social Enterprise Summit. Great job doing that. Any one of our panelists would like to tackle the question on the issue around mental health well-being?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your question and for redirecting it back to well-being as the theme. I personally do think mental health is and should be the number one thing in our lives. I think honestly, nothing else matters more than the way we belong in the world, the way we feel, how we live our life, how we have social relations with people, how society cares for us. I think nothing else is above that. And unfortunately, I find that in places like Hong Kong, like psychiatric care or psychotherapy is not popular. It is not very well supplied in terms of the availability of therapists. And that also drives the price of healthcare, of mental health care, extremely expensive. And there has been, at the moment, no policy solutions, right? We're not training more therapists. We're not increasing access. And I think they're also handling the sort of, things like media and how social media affects people's mental health. They're not really handling that as well as they would in Europe. I would love to see, solutions around this. And one thing that I'm very excited about is using a generative AI, so like ChatGPT, as a short-term, light-touch solution as therapy. Because I personally also use ChatGPT as my therapist. I wrote a really vague prompt and said what types of responses I like. You're moving away from me again. Yeah, I know. And so my prompt is like, how I'd love, for them to respond, what tone, the warmth, ask me questions, use CBT, you're Harvard trained psychiatrist. But I find that extremely useful, right? It's instantaneous. There's no judgment. There's no cost to any of this. And if anything, it has less subjective bias than a human therapist. In many ways, it brings more benefit, to mental health care than what the current system that we have. I hate that we have to use machines, but that's where we're at right now, right? It's very unfortunate. I'd love to see more policy support on mental health, honestly, more training, lowering the cost of mental health care. But before we get there, unfortunately, we have to use machines and technology. But I'm very excited about that. Like, if there are solutions out there that uses GPT and so forth to allow people to have that instant access, if they have really, dark thoughts or depressive thoughts, if they have a panic attack, or even just generally, right? I'm just upset today. I feel bad after work. That they have someone there, even though it's AI, I think it's already transforming lives. And so, yeah, I'd love to see the integration of technology that is helping mental health care.
All right, Ellen, please chime in.
Well, first, thank you, Evan. And so next time before speaking to my husband, I'll consider that as a first result. And speaking to Jackie's queries, I think that's a very valid question. Actually, I've read some research that the mental health is emerging to become one of the top killer, not just in Hong Kong, but then around the world. Is a major issue. And what I would also link with the previous question of scale, and then I remember, about this one, because I agree that at the moment, take Hong Kong for example, there has been so many different individuals and foundations have been doing a lot of things in the past, decade, mental health champions, training, student championship, and then, the thing is, psychiatrist cost is high, and we are all looking at something when we look about scale, apart from the ticket size and then the impact as a society, we also look at the cost effectiveness. So from what I understand, there are many people already looking at different solutions. For example, if there are, immediately we cannot find, any government policy readily available. Is there any way to build a, sort of sector in between psychiatrists and your ChatGPT or your friend next door? Is there anything, a therapist in between? Can we somehow grow that sector, to reduce the cost? And coupled with other ways like AI. By the way, from my understanding, many social organizations are actually finding this is very effective using, the face, contactless kind of solution for young people in particular when it comes to mental health issue because they feel comfortable speaking it out. So I think, if we could, moving forward, if there are ways that could substantially reduce, that cost and improve that cost effectiveness, I can see the end of the tunnel, in this regard. That's the point I want to chip in.
Thank you. So on the note, and ending this on a high on the theme of sustainable well-being, we draw this session conclusion to an end. But before we do so formally, I'd like you to join me in thank our great panelists for their fantastic contributions for today.